This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And Doc, as you know, DC Sports at Lakeside Mall in Sterling Heights is one of our fine sponsors at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And it is your go-to source for premier authentic sports memorabilia and terrific autograph signings. To find out more about DC Sports and all of the signings and memorabilia they do have at their store once again at Lakeside Mall in Sterling Heights, please follow DC Sports on Twitter at DC Sports Detroit and make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitCitySports.com. And welcome to the latest and freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, really quick, the Tigers still suck going into the All-Star break. And it is now the All-Star break. The Tigers have some reprieve, and maybe they need the rest as well. What do you think, Doc?
No All-Star break for Chirco and Company.
No, we're still going at it.
It's all good, brother. I'm looking forward to this podcast. We got a lot to get into, especially regarding the fact that both you and I took in the All-Star Game Home Run Derby. Wow, what a contest. I think the prize, the giveaway of $1 million to the winner, made it an unbelievable contest. I think everybody was thrilled to see Vlad Guerrero versus Jock Peterson. Everybody didn't want that to end. 3 overtimes in terms of the swing-off. That was awesome. It was a great display, and to see what happened there was a fun experience to watch on a Monday. Yeah, we're going to talk about, on this week's podcast, we're going to talk about Miguel Cabrera. Now, obviously he's not going to pick a fight with you and I regarding our comments regarding his leadership, but he will take notice regarding the fact that Jack Morris in the paper and on radio has kind of said some things regarding his leadership. He took strong offense that last game versus Boston, in which he was ejected in the first inning. He took strong offense and spoke for damn near 25 minutes regarding, his thoughts on leadership, the season, things like that. He spoke on a myriad of issues, and we'll definitely give our reaction to that. But to start the podcast, the holiday break was going on. You were out of town. I wasn't really into, obviously, podcasting and sports at the time. So what happens July 5th? I knew it, too. The funny part was that sometimes life just presents you curveballs. So you and I decided, look, we're working hard. We've kind of, covered golf. You did your first, interview in the clubhouse with an athlete. So we're like, okay, let's lay low July 4th, 5th, 6th. Let's just enjoy, even though the Boston Red Sox are coming to town, let's just not, go cover it. I went and covered Sunday's game. Let's just take Friday and Saturday off. And then what happens Friday?
Jim Leland's there, right?
There's a major announcement. Al Avila's contract gets renewed. Now,
and that as well. My God.
We're going to talk about our reactions to that because it was a Friday news dump, but there was still a lot of media there. They did ask him a lot of questions. Al Avila, spoke for half an hour, and he was candid and he was honest, and he was pretty much frank and said, look, this is kind of the darkest hour. This is the darkest period for the Detroit Tigers, and he spoke openly about it. But the interesting note was, Vito, Friday and Saturday's games were marred by rain delays. So if you and I had went to go cover it, we would have been there for hours and hours and hours, in terms of the rain delays. So thank goodness you and I used our time a little bit better. We were not there to experience all those rain delays. But, we did miss out on probably the biggest story for the Detroit Tigers in the first half. Al Avila had a year and a half left on his contract. But, around that time, at the end of this season, you don't want to lose some of his colleagues and others that will be wondering what's going on. So Chris Ilitch decided to extend Al Avila. It was announced July 5th, and it was really the reaction that the fans had on Twitter, the reaction that many people had was, why? Why would you do this now, especially when he has, time on his contract, when we still have to kind of see what he does during this year's trade market and what he brings back and what he's able to do for Nick Castellanos and Matthew Boyd. So many people were upset. And I understand. 100% I understand and respect the fans' reactions. You know why? Many people equate a contract extension with validation that you're doing a good job. And many people that are evaluating Al Avila are going, man, a lot of the guys that we've picked up for J.D. Martinez, for Justin Upton, for Verlander, for the guys that we've let go, for the plethora of talent that was on the roster, we're not seeing a great deal of return back. So when you extend somebody, especially, many fans are Lions fans, and they saw what happened with Matt Millen when his tenure was horrible and he got an extension. Many people equate extension with, okay, hey, we believe in your work. And I would say, you know what? It's fair to look at it and say, you know what, Vito? Yeah, he got you this far, but if you were to cut it off next year and you say, you know what, we're not happy with what's going on, and you pass the reins to somebody else, maybe the rebuild could take place faster, because at this point in time, in mid-July of 2019, nobody knows where this rebuild is going. Nobody knows if this is going to take a decade. Nobody knows if any of the players that are in the minors are going to be successful. You have guys that are in the minors that are doing things, but you don't see that complete player. And I think all of us that watched Vlad Guerrero Jr. were just like, man.
Where is that position player on the Tigers?
Where's that for the
Nowhere
Tigers?
to be seen. I think nowhere to be seen in the farm system either, which is a scary issue for the Tigers moving forward.
Where's the Pete Alonso that comes in
Any
and
of
handles
these
business?
guys that are position players that can hit for power. Look at the Tigers. Those guys, combined to hit more home runs than the Tigers have hit all season long. Or I think maybe just one of them by themselves hit more home runs than the Tigers have all this season going into the All-Star break.
In a season where the balls are flying out of ballparks.
Juice balls. Verlander just went off and slammed Commissioner Manfred in Major League Baseball for these juice balls. He's allowed a league-high 26 home runs this season just for Verlander. He went off, right, before the home run derby on Monday. And then the Tigers came and hit home runs. I mean, how bad is that and a detriment to the Tigers and how they've been constructed by one man, and that is Al Avila?
But if we want to put ourselves in the shoes of Chris Ilitch, does he have to do this because he basically has been hands-off? He's put, this team in place, and I guess you have to see it through, especially when you're going through a rebuild, really in year 1 and 2 of a 5-6 year rebuild. Did he have to extend Al Avila to keep this going? Or at this point in time, should he have taken a serious critical look at what's going on? Many people also are noting that Al Avila is a guy that for his services does the job cheaply. He's one of the lowest paid general managers in the league, and he's willing to accept these extensions and deals from Chris Ilitch, and that Chris Ilitch is not willing to go out there and pay a high-end GM to come in here and do the job. So when you look at it, do you say to yourself, okay, I understand what Chris Ilitch is doing, or do you say to yourself, Chris Ilitch should have taken a stand, done a critical analysis of what's actually going on, take a serious look at the trades that have been made, the free agent signings that have taken place, and really make an evaluation and maybe lean toward moving forward with somebody else?
Well, when you're 28 and 57 going into the All-Star break, you don't extend anybody midseason. It's a PR nightmare, right? So then you have to deal with the backlash from the fans and media alike. That's what the Tigers are dealing with right now. So no matter if Avila's done a good job rebuilding the team or not, when you extend the GM and executive VP of baseball operations mid-season, when you're well under 500 and in dead last in your own division.
And on July 5th.
Yeah, on July 5th, the day after the 4th of July, when nobody's covering the team, nobody even cares to talk about the Tigers, then you extend them almost to what? To avoid all the media backlash? Guess what? You're not going to avoid it. In this day and age of social media madness and 24/7 news cycle that we live in nowadays, Doc, you're going to hear from the fans and media, even if you throw this news on the day after the 4th of July when not as many media members, including Doc and I, were, not at the ballpark. So still, you're dealing with the backlash now. And I honestly think, why not wait at the very least until the end of this season to extend Al Avila? If you thought he was doing a good job with this rebuild. A lot of people don't think that's the case. So I would have waited until after his current contract runs out, which would have been after the 2020 campaign, because next year's a big season to view the results of Al Avila's rebuild. Because by midway next season, the Tigers should have some position players and some of these top pitching prospects up on the Major League roster. That's when we can start judging the quality of the rebuild conducted/executed by Al Avila.
Exactly.
Until then, we can't.
Exactly. All you had to do was wait. You didn't have to extend him. But the theory is many of his staff also don't want to view Al Avila as a lame duck, because then what happens is, because this is what people do, in terms of big-time sports, You have a staff. Al Avila has an assistant GM. He has other staffers. He's got directors of personnel. And if they realize, potentially speaking, that Chris Ilitch is going to evaluate and not extend him, then you get into that lame duck status. And then some of the staffs decide to leave. And that's the biggest problem, is that for continuity's sake, you start to do what Chris Ilitch does, is you extend him a little bit early so that everyone calms down, everyone goes about their business. So I can understand that in terms of, not causing anxiety among the entire organization. So for me, I understand what Chris Ilitch did. I just don't agree with it. I agree 100% with what you just said, in that it's time to evaluate Al Avila on what he's done. He's been the general manager, for a bit of time. Multiple drafts, multiple trade periods, multiple free agent signing periods. What are we seeing? And especially, this year, when you look at it, he brings in Tyson Ross. He brings in Matt Moore. He brings in Mercer. And guess what happens? There's nobody on the field.
Honestly, I've forgotten about some of those guys. How sad is that? Fans, right, to a large extent, have forgotten about Tyson Ross and Matt Moore by this point. So what have his acquisitions provided to the big league club this season or in years past? Nothing, really.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look. And the way you look at it, too, I'll ask you straight up, Vito. What's your take on the rebuild so far? Are you realizing potentially that if this doesn't work, you're going to be almost my age before the Detroit Tigers are competitive?
Don't do that to me. You're an old man.
Vito, you could be covering a Detroit Tiger baseball team from the time you're 26 to 40 without significant playoff contention or any serious results. You believe that? You could cover the team for a decade. You could be 35 years old, like I was when I started the podcast, a decade, because it doesn't go right, and you rebuild again, it's another 5 years.
Scary to think that way. I just vomited in my own mouth, by the way, everybody out there, okay? Scary. Thing is, though, how about this question for everybody out there? Would another major league club take the chance on Al Avila to be its GM? Think about that question.
I think so,
See,
yeah.
that's the bad thing when you think about the team extending now Al Avila for a non-specific amount of years, by the way. It hasn't been revealed to the masses about how long this extension will be for Al Avila. Would another major league club hire Al Avila to be its GM and executive VP of baseball operations? If the answer is no, by the way, then it's clear-cut that the Tigers have made a mistake by extending Al Avila past 2020.
Yeah, it's a tough decision. It's one that, when it went down, everybody was weighing in and people writing articles regarding all the moves that were made. The big thing is, and I truly agree, nobody cares about the prospects. Everybody wants to see what's going on at the Major League Baseball level, what's going on with the Tigers. Obviously, you have Jake Rogers, you have some pitchers in the minors, but a lot of them are having up and down years. You have some of these drafts where you picked 15 people and no one has that buzz. No one has that, like, oh my God, Franklin Perez, one of the marquee guys you got in the Verlander trade. He's hurt. He's barely pitched. And you realize, man, there's no real complete player. There's always something. There's always a deficiency or something that's going on, or they're not having quality seasons in the minors. And you realize, man, it's and then at some point, some people are like, you know what? Even if Jake Rogers is struggling offensively, his defense is amazing. Everyone raves about his defense. Just bring him up, because we don't want to see Bobby Wilson, Hicks, Grayson Greiner. Who are those guys? We want to see, what the fans, by and large, want to see is, look, just bring everybody up and see what they got. And if we know in 3 years, then why wait until, 4 years from now to decide about these guys? I think the fans, by and large, just want to see all these young guys up right now, and the organization is taking a little bit slower approach in terms of, hey, you got to be 24, 25 to get into the majors, play several seasons in the minors, where the fans are by and large like, look, just bring them up here. If they can play, they can play. If they can't, let's just move on and get to the next set of guys. But I do think that there has to be a certain level of patience that has to be taking place for the fans. But at the same time, there is no indication that what's going to take place is going to be successful. Now, there's no indication it's not going to be successful, but right now, what's going on in the minors and at the big league club is making a lot of people frustrated and a lot of people concerned, because the signs aren't there, especially when you have other teams in your division making moves and rebuilding at a faster pace, getting bigger names. Now, the rebuild could work in terms of getting back to playoff relevancy, but are you building a team that's going to win the World Series? Is this painful rebuild going to result in something that's going to be the ultimate prize? And that's what people are concerned about with the Pistons and Tigers is, are they going to rebuild for what? to get to the playoffs? Are they going to rebuild to take one shot at it where, you have these guys that all produce and then you're going to add like 2 or 3 free agents? What's this going to entail? Or are we going to be the Houston Astros where you get 2 or 3 chances at it? That's the big gamble. And it's going to be fascinating to look at what the Detroit Tigers are on pace to do here. It's going to be a scary couple years here, Vito. This rebuild just started, and it's off to a little bit of a bumpy start.
But there is something to be impatient. And Vito Jerome Chirco here on these airways will tell you, patience is a virtue. I learned that at a very young age.
You're patient, huh?
And maybe I'm ultra patient and too patient at times with like my job life and everything else in my life. But from a Major League Baseball team standpoint, when you're rebuilding, it's going to be, to a certain extent at least, prolonged. It's going to last 3 to 5 years to really see the fruits of your labor. So rushing these guys and then expediting, jump-starting their service time is not what these major league clubs, including the Tigers, desire and want to do. So they're going to take their time. And maybe at times, and right now, it's very tough to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But to jump to a conclusion right now about Al Avila in this rebuild would be premature, because there is no definitive answer right now with the Tigers in their rebuild and how good it will be. There is no definitive conclusion to make about it and whether or not it will be successful and lead to playoff appearances on a consistent year-to-year basis. And the thing is, even if it is a good rebuild, you know what? It's hard to say that it's great, because what if you never win the World Series? What if that never does occur? Then is the rebuild deemed a huge failure? Is it a semi-failure? Is it still good but just not great? That's the thing, because you can rebuild forever. Go the 3 to 5 years rebuilding and rebuild the right way, execute it in such near perfect fashion, but at the end of the day, you still might not win it all. Not every team is like the Houston Astros, and wins a world championship based on their rebuild and it going well. You can have a nice rebuild, have it go as, perfect as you possibly envisioned, and still, you might never win it all. So remember that as well, Tigers fans out there. And back to my original point, be patient. Patience is a virtue.
Now, after the sweep, the Boston Red Sox come in and they sweep the Detroit Tigers. And it's unfortunate, but in the end, everyone realized, okay, Boston's better than the Detroit Tigers. You have Dave Dombrowski bringing in his squad, and they take care of business versus the Tigers. They sweep. So after Sunday's game, after, again, losing at Comerica Park, in which the Detroit Tigers have not played well the majority of the 2019 season, Miguel Cabrera asked questions, and he's ready to answer it. And it was fascinating, too, is the person that told him about Jack Morris's comments is Nick Castellanos. Nick Castellanos reads those comments in the Free Press, and he's like, man, that's so wrong. Why is Jack Morris talking about us? And why, he's supposed to understand our plight, and he's supposed to understand what we're going through. He's not even in the clubhouse. And Miguel's like, no, it's okay. Let's just handle our business. But he's getting fired up, and during Sunday's game, he's not happy with the way in which the umpires are handling their business. He feels like, okay, our young guys are not getting the benefit of the doubt in the strike zone. It's really different compared to what happened with Boston. So he's chirping, and he gets ejected. He's not part of the game anymore after the first inning. And after the game, he's asked a series of questions, and he's not happy. He's like, look, come in here, and I want to talk to Jack, in that I want to be a leader on this team. I want to, fight for the guys. I am a guy that's important, and I am a guy that wants to be a leader. And so it was fascinating in that you have, an all-time great Detroit Tiger, and he's viewing what's going on. And it was said that he actually had a conversation with Miggy regarding what's going on. And he walked away kind of feeling like, okay, Miguel is a leader, but in his own way. He's not the rah-rah type leader. He's not the guy that's going to just grab somebody and force them. He's not going to be that angry, like in-your-face type leader. He's just going to be encouraging, try to lead by example, and handle business. But many people, including Jack Morris, are kind of saying, look, that nature in terms of how he presents himself isn't conducive to what's going on, and especially when the optics of the play where he doesn't run out a strikeout, and people are like, man, you look out of shape. You don't appear to be doing all that you can do to handle your business. And many people are saying, look, we're aware you're not happy that you're the DH, but you got to be professional. You got to earn that contract. When you're not producing home runs, when you're kind of making a couple plays that are, to the masses appearing to be lazy, and then you're not the guy behind the scenes riling everybody up. You may be a guy that is a little too passive with, the ball club. Jack Morris spouted off a little bit, and Miguel Cabrera and Nick Castellanos chirped back, and they were not happy in the manner in which that went down. So what's your take on it? Do you feel like Jack Morris had the right to speak like that? And in terms of, hey, Team Morris or Team Cabrera, where do you lie?
I'm more Team Morris, honestly, because I've viewed Miguel Cabrera in the past, too, as not a true clubhouse leader. I mean, I spoke ad nauseum about it on last week's episode. If you did listen in to Nico Gooderham, then we talked about Miguel Cabrera and his lack of leadership attributes and qualities. I've seen that for a long, long time because it's been talked about for a long, long time that he's not that true rah-rah or just true all-around leader that he should be as a veteran clubhouse guy.
Okay, so wait, what does that entail? What is Jack
a true
Morris...
clubhouse leader, what he's talking about?
Yeah.
I think is the running out the plays, being in shape, being there for your teammates at all times, which Jack and I don't totally know. Like all of us right now in the studio, right? You and I don't know totally about Miguel Cabrera always being there at the side of his teammates when there is trouble and they're going through struggles. I just don't see him being the guy that takes on the leadership responsibilities because it's been spoken about. It's been clear-cut in the past based on the media, what they've reported. It's been that Miguel Cabrera in years past has not been that true clear-cut clubhouse leader when he should be because he's making $30 million annually. The thing is, though, just because you're a superstar slugger and the highest paid athlete on your roster, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be the clubhouse leader. It might be somebody making $1 million or $2 million that really is more of that leader exuding and exemplifying those leadership qualities on a game-to-game basis.
Okay.
So I can see where Morris is coming from, but I also saw Cabrera show some fight, and I did appreciate that about Miguel Cabrera as well.
And I think he makes a solid argument in that this team is all young. You're not going to take a young guy that's just, freaking out a little bit day by day in terms of, his job, not feeling comfortable. And you're not going to just rile him up and just be like, hey, get your shit together, do your thing. You're going to be a little bit more encouraging. You're going to be a little bit more jovial. You're going to be a little bit more friendly. You're not going to take a hardline approach with a young cat because the young cat, at the time is not thinking about like making sure he's doing everything perfectly. He's just worried about being up in the majors. He's worried about making sure that he stays, getting paid and things like that, not getting sent back down to Toledo. So at the same time, I think that Miggy is a leader, but not in the way in which you and I or Jack would like. And I think you and I and Jack are kind of similar in that we're more along the lines of like, hey, lead by example, do everything you can, and then at the same time, then you can show that, hey, follow my lead, we'll handle business. But when you're not running out plays, when you're maybe...
Yeah, it's piss poor. Do everything the right way. He's not doing everything on the baseball diamond the right way.
Exactly. And I think that's where Jack Morris and maybe some others will complain is that, hey, you're out of shape. You're not in shape.
It's clear cut.
It's clear cut.
You have to watch, an inning or one AB of his, and he's out of shape.
How do you know that?
You watch the games? You watch the games at Comerica when you're there covering the team? He's out of shape. How big is his belly? Yeah. Come on, that's not in shape. He can't move, hasn't been able to for a long time. And I think that's really led to the lingering injuries with his knee being in the bad shape that it is. Everything else that is in the bad shape that it is. And someone that is, Father Time being undefeated because he's 36 now in the advanced state of his career.
What if he were to come in and counter that and say, look, well, if I have a bad knee, that would indicate I can't run. I can't do cardio.
Sure, but how about 5 years ago when you could have been in better shape, you refused to get into shape because you still were able to overcome all of that back then because you were a superstar athlete.
So you're saying
he's not that anymore because he's older.
Because he's been overweight, it contributed to his diminishing knee.
That's what I feel like.
Okay.
I think that's been proven scientifically. People that have viewed this, studied it, and I'm no scientist or doctor. I'm not trying to diagnose what he's been going through. But I think when you're out of shape earlier in life, it leads to you having further issues later in life that could have been prevented by you being in shape earlier in life. That's my point about Miguel Cabrera here, Doc.
No doubt about it. And I think that Miguel, hey, he's fighting back and he wants to speak on it. He wants to address it with Jack Morris. At the same time, I do think that he does have to kind of rein it in a little bit. Him and Nick just have to go out there day by day, just handle business, try and perform.
Perform well. Nick Castellanos has no room to talk. At least Cabrera's hitting 300 something right now. Thing is, he's not hitting for power anymore, but he is 36. Okay, so you got to give him a little bit of slack there. And we would be if he wasn't making $30 million annually. So I still feel like, and I'll diss him, and I have for a long, long time now, he's making way too much money to be producing only for average and not hitting for power. But he still is hitting for average. And who else is on the Tigers right now? Who else is getting on base on a consistent game-to-game basis? You can't find anybody, including Nick C., who could be the captain of this team right now. But He's refusing to be that as well, and he's not exemplifying it on the baseball diamond because he's not producing at the plate, which is what the Tigers are paying him to do.
Do you see Miggy chirping a little bit more throughout the rest of the season, or do you say, you know what, based on the reaction that fans are going to have regarding his spat with Jack Morris, that maybe he's going to take a step back and just, you know what, ride out the season, get out of here as fast as you can, and get to 2020?
I think he's been so perturbed. I think if people keep dissing him and other people in the media, people on Twitter, he's going to respond. Because I think the emotions are boiled up now inside of him, and he's just exuding all of the negative energy that he's had sitting on the inside of him for a long, long time now.
All right, Vito, let's show love to a great sponsor, the Detroit Sports Commission. Second half of the podcast, we got to break down the All-Star game and look at JV's comments in relation to Max Scherzer's comments, because both of them addressed the nature of the juice baseballs, but they took different stances, and many people are kind of like, oh, JV versus Max Scherzer continues. We'll talk about that second half of the podcast. You're listening to Tigers Talk on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Speaking of All-Stars, by the way, Doc, the Detroit Sports Commission is an All-Star sponsor for us at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And you can follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitSports.org for many things, including articles done by me, Q&As and podcasts coming up in the very near future, all about the 2019 Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic taking place from August 29th through 31st at lovely Wayne State University. A lot of marquee matchups, rematches from a season ago. You got state champions at the D1 level in Chippewa Valley, at the D2 level, at the D3 level in Detroit King. You've got plenty of great teams and plenty of talent to see. All 3 days of the Prep Kickoff Classic, and it is the 15-year anniversary of the PKC as well. So to find out more details and to check out, once again, all of my dandy articles and podcasts about and leading up to the Prep Kickoff Classic, please check out the Detroit Sports Commission's terrific website at DetroitSports.org.
So, Vito, I'm going to ask you straight up. Are the balls in Major League Baseball juiced? Something's going on, because when you look at the home run numbers in May, June, a lot of people are talking about, wow, you know, month after month, the home runs that are flying out of these ballparks are at a record pace, and people are like, something's going on. Well, JV and Max Scherzer, obviously talking about it at the Major League Baseball All-Star game, are talking about the fact that, hey, it's obvious, something's up. And as this story has evolved, I realized something, okay? The baseballs that are played and used in the games are made by Rawlings, okay? Well, guess what? Rawlings recently was purchased by Major League Baseball, and there's been a change in terms of the ball. So in terms of what's going on, you know, if a company is purchased by another company and we start to see a drastic change in the ball, there seems to be a certain link potentially to the fact that, hey, maybe Major League Baseball did something to the balls to make it a little bit more exciting, more offense, especially when Manfred has come out early on in his tenure as baseball commissioner, has said, look, I think it'd be great if there was more offense. There might be a correlation with more offense, more home runs, and the ball kind of flying out of the ballpark. Well, Justin Verlander, like you said prior to the break, he's not happy. He obviously is a guy that's like, look, I'm a pitcher, I'm competitive, and you're putting me at a disadvantage now when the baseball is flying out of the park. He's given up, like you said, a league-high 26 home runs, and he's like, dude, this is terrible. This is ridiculous. What's going on here? Max Scherzer took a more diplomatic approach, and many people are saying that maybe he took a dig at Justin Verlander where he said, look, yeah, the ball's probably something's up with them. There's something, I see a difference. There appears to be some kind of difference, but I'm not going to cry about it. Our hitters on the Nationals get an opportunity to hit the baseball, and it's advantageous. So what's your stance on it? And is it something where you say, yeah, okay, look, it's obvious they did something to it, but it's producing runs, it's making baseball fun, and look what we're about to talk about. You and I were ranting and raving how exciting the home run derby was because of the fact that, wow, Vlad Guerrero, Jock Peterson, Pete Alonso, they were hitting the home runs at a record clip in the home run derby, and they put $1 million on it to the winner. So it was a fun event all the way around. I don't seem to have a problem with it. Obviously, it sucks that the Tigers are not, a team that can hit a bunch of home runs. But at Comerica Park, I'm seeing the baseball fly from the opponents at a record clip. Boston hit home runs. Hey, Brendan Dixon's got 12 home runs. So that's something in and of itself. You look at it and you say, I think it's good for the game. It's not a big problem in my eyes. Because remember, chicks dig the long ball. Media dig the long ball. It makes for a much better game to see a 5-4 game, 7-6 game, as opposed to a 1-0 pitcher's duel.
Dudes and chicks alike dig the long ball. Now, regarding this controversy or maybe the bickering between Verlander and Scherzer, Scherzer said he's not going to cry about it. He's inferring somebody else is crying about it, and the guy that I don't think he liked is a teammate in Detroit, and that is Justin Verlander. Definitely a war of words, and yes, I think Scherzer chose those words because of Verlander being up in arms about the balls and the balls being doctored supposedly and being juiced as he labeled them. Now, the funny thing to me, Doc, I don't know if you saw this from Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, but he said, yes, the baseballs are different right now, but he did not correlate them directly to being juiced. Okay, so the balls are different than they used to be. He said, but the balls aren't juiced. Really? I think you're just not admitting that there is a direct link to the balls being juiced, meaning being doctored by Major League Baseball. And based on the notion or the factoid that you brought up, Doc, regarding Major League Baseball using Rawlings-produced baseballs and purchasing Rawlings, well, guess what? The balls then are being controlled by Major League Baseball. And I think Verlander is definitely onto something, but it's led to more home runs. It's led to, I think, more interest in the game of baseball. And maybe it's not hugely quantifiable yet, but I think seeing a bunch of home runs is better than seeing a bunch of one-run games or one to nothing games specifically, or 2-1 games. So I think for the sake of the game of baseball moving forward at every single level, I think you do want to see more long balls hit than not enough long balls being hit. And I think Rob Manfred saw a problem at hand for himself in Major League Baseball, that there wasn't enough interest in the game at the major league level specifically. And I think from the younger fans, they've been tuning it out. And because of the slowness per se involved with the game, the length of the games being 3 hours plus, and that's too long for you and I think we have some rather nice attention spans. But the younger kids and my peers, Doc, it's too slow for them. And so you need some excitement involved with the games. And what's a way of adding excitement for, once again, the chicks and dudes alike? Well, it's adding home runs to the game. So Verlander has to deal with it. By the way, his ERA is still under 3. He's still kicking some major behind. So Verlander's still succeeding at a high level. He is starting the All-Star game the night of this recording for the American League All-Star team. So he's not struggling because of it. So really hearing him cry about it when he's making all this money and still succeeding at a very, very high level, at an All-Star level, yeah, really, it's not warranted then, JV. And I know you've allowed a bunch of home runs, but you haven't allowed a lot of runs outside of those 26 long balls. So get over it. The balls seem to be doctored. I really agree with JV. I believe in that theory that the balls have been doctored and are currently juiced. And we just have to live with it, though. Move on. And as Max Scherzer said about it, and I think directly in reaction to JV and his comments about it, I'm not going to cry about it. I'm going to move past it and suck it up and not worry about it ultimately, Doc.
So I got to ask you, obviously, many people realize that Max Scherzer was not able to stay with the Detroit Tigers because of the long contract that was given to Justin Verlander. The organization stuck with the homegrown guy, and that's just the way it was. Now, some people will realistically argue that, that was the wrong choice. Maybe that the Detroit Tigers could have totally done something different and moved on from Verlander and stuck with Scherzer, and then you had a piece at the time when he was in his prime. You could have moved him and gotten a bunch of assets that potentially could have been paired with J.D. Martinez and other pitchers on the staff. And maybe if you would have made Justin Verlander the odd man out, then potentially you would have invested in Scherzer, the guy that was grinding, that went to the minors, that kind of came back. And looking at it, who's the better pitcher? Is it Scherzer? Is it Verlander? And in terms of the Tigers and the decision they made, do you agree with what they did in terms of sticking with the homegrown guy? Or maybe can you take a serious look and say maybe if the Tigers would have stuck with Scherzer, they might be in a better spot today, instead of maybe having Jordan Zimmerman soaking up a bunch of money to really do nothing.
By the way, buy out Jordan Zimmerman. At that point, I wanted to say that. I know we weren't going to really talk about him, but he has stunk it up now since coming back from the injured list and all season long. He really has sucked it up, and now he's injury prone as well. He's not getting any younger. He's not in his prime, not even close to his prime. Look at his ERA and his numbers across the board right now, Doc. They are stinking. He has been stinking up the joint clearly. It is time to move on from him. I would love to see that happen. Max Scherzer, yes, was a better guy to keep. In hindsight, they should have kept Max Scherzer over Justin Verlander. Yet they kept JV because of his homegrown status. And he did achieve a lot with the Tigers, including winning an MVP award. So he did a lot to warrant the contract that he got. Then he became injury prone then. And towards the latter part of his tenure with the Tigers, he did redeem himself and then got traded to the Houston Astros, obviously. And the Tigers got at the time what looked like a nice haul for JV's services. But maybe, yes, if they would have kept Max Scherzer, they would have gotten a better haul of assets for long term in return for him. So they did. I think they really did pass up the better guy and choosing to re-sign JV over Max Scherzer, who once again was offered, I believe, an 8-year, $144 million deal from Mr. I back in the day. And Max Scherzer felt like he was lowball, took the risk on himself, and it worked out extremely well for Max Scherzer with all the money that he got paid by the Washington Nationals. But yes, maybe they could have and should have. And I think, yes, they should have kept Max Scherzer, and they could have gotten a better return in return for him. Yet, still you have to bring up right now and take into account, Doc, that who knows, with Al Avila running the ship in Motown, if the Tigers would have gotten that great of a return for Max Scherzer. Because if you deem Al Avila to be a failure of a GM and looking at his track record in dealing JD Martinez, including in dealing JV, he hasn't gotten a lot of great assets for the long-term future in return for those dudes who were top-tier players. So could he have really gotten that great of a return in return for Scherzer? There's no clear-cut answer regarding that. But yes, to go back to your original question, I really do think, Doc, that Max Scherzer should have been the guy that was kept over Justin Verlander.
Vito, solid. Very solid. I think a lot of people will take the approach. And I did put a poll on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, and I said, who do you side with in this long-time feud? Early results, 83% have come in and chimed in on the side of Team Verlander. And I think because of the fact that Verlander won our ring, the fact that he ingrained himself to the culture, and he's just a guy that really wanted to be a Detroit Tiger, and the idea that it took him to the last final seconds to approve that trade and to get out of here, it really kind of hits home to a lot of fans that, hey, Verlander was our guy and Scherzer was the outsider and things like that. But at the same time, if you look at it critically, Scherzer was the better guy. I think that obviously he's produced, and I think they're both quality pitchers, and I think that both of them, you really, if they were both on the squad, I don't think you really would regret having either Verlander or Scherzer on the team. But at the same time, I think Scherzer a little bit more kind of represents what Detroit's about, grinding, really, hustling. But at the same time, it was a disrespectful offer the Tigers made him, right? He turned it down, too. And I think at the time when, Mike Ilitch made that offer and Max Scherzer kind of was like, whoa, and just kind of didn't sign it, I think that was a major offense and slap in the face to Mike Ilitch, and, they parted ways. But at the same time, he's worth it. He's worth every penny that he got.
And even more money. Yeah. He's making like $42-something million per season. Yet, based on WAR and what he's produced for the Nationals and what he is right now this season for the Nats, he's worth more than that. Even more than $40+ million annually, Doc.
Would Max Scherzer be Max Scherzer if he was on the Tigers still? Would he be that guy if he was actually signed to that big money deal? Would he actually be better than Jordan Zimmerman, obviously? Would he be a guy?
Yeah, he'd be better than Jay Zim. Look at Jay Zim, what he's been doing. Nothing. Irrelevance.
If you just want to be critical a little bit, if you just keep Scherzer, you invest in him, you move on from others, potentially speaking, you say, okay, I can build around Max Scherzer, and then you could build around him. You could have, the marquee pitcher, and then you go out there and maybe get one more offensive weapon, and the rebuild didn't have to be this bad. You could have kind of went to maybe a 500 team instead of being the worst team in baseball, but they're taking the approach of like, hey, let's draft, in the top 10 every year for the next 4 or 5 years and see what happens. I can see their theory, but you can also take a look at this rebuild could have gone differently, could have taken a different shape where it wasn't this bad. And if you would have decided to start the rebuild a little bit sooner, you might have done a little bit better.
But keeping Max Scherzer, they would have done that doesn't mean they would have been a contender all of a sudden or that much better, because one starting pitcher doesn't mean your team's going to be great. It doesn't lead to success. So they would have had to deal him once again anyways, and then what would they have gotten in return for him? What kind of haul? If you deem Al Avila once again to be a failure as a GM so far as Tigers general manager, Doc, you can't believe in him having gotten a great haul for Max Scherzer if he would have kept Max Scherzer. So remember that as well about those people that think the Tigers should have kept Max Scherzer over Justin Verlander. Yes, Scherzer, it seems like, has done more since then, since leaving Motown specifically. But it's still only one starting arm. You can't win with that in the major leagues.
Interesting stuff all the way around. I think the fans on our podcast, at least, are going to side with Justin Verlander. But there's some comments. Jay gets in. He says, I see all the local Detroit tools are siding with Verlander, who, by the way, is a complete dick. Team Max all the way. Jay
really
strong.
harsh there, huh?
Oh, Jay gets in strong, but it's going to be interesting to see in terms of how the fans react to it. And unfortunately, we can't go back in time. Max Scherzer is no longer part of the rebuild. One note, though, that many people will look to is that maybe you could have gotten more pieces for Michael Fulmer if you decided to actually pull the trigger. So another critique regarding Al Avila and some of the moves that have been made. But let's end on a good note. The All-Star Game Home Run Derby was awesome. It was a coming-out party for some young cats, and it was nice to see. I mean, Jock Peterson, Vlad Guerrero, Pete Alonso, they did some great stuff, man. And it really, when you're sitting there watching it, all you want to do is be entertained. And by and large, holy cow, man, Pete Alonso, in that final round, he kind of uses timeouts properly. I like the way they set it up where, based on distance and number of home runs, you get bonus time. I think an additional 30 seconds. So by and large, it was a great event. I was hooked on it. Vlad Guerrero's swing is so violent. I was like, man, how can he hit 30-plus home runs in a round with that violent swing and not be dead exhausted? But the use of the timeouts was awesome, and it was a fun experience all the way around. I enjoyed it. Now, I wish it wouldn't have ran long because I'm also a fan of poker, and it cut into the World Series of Poker coverage. But by and large, fine. It ended at 10:40, but I was very much entertained. I liked the fact that $1 million was added to the winner. It made it so that it was super exciting. The coverage was great. And I think Cleveland's done a good job so far in terms of hosting the All-Star Game festivities.
If I could hit home runs like that, why wouldn't I join? Why wouldn't you join the Home Run Derby?
Yeah.
To make $1 million by winning it? Look at these guys. I mean, Pete Alonso won $1 million. That's more than he's making this season playing for the Mets. Did you know that? Like Vlad Guerrero Jr., if he would have won that $1 million as well, would have been more than what he's making with the Toronto Blue Jays as a rookie this season, Doc.
Wow.
Think about all of that. Now, Vlad Guerrero Jr. eventually tired out in that final round against Pete Alonso, and Alonso won the Derby. Great to see those young studs and so many great young players in Major League Baseball currently. Where are they on the Tigers, though? I mean, in retrospect, right, when looking at the Tigers and comparing the Tigers, what they have, and on the farm even among position players, to Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Pete Alonso. Alonso's 24. Guerrero Jr. is even younger than that. Where are the Tigers' young players? Where are they going to be next year and years to come, Doc?
Hey, Manning and what's-his-face, Paredes.
Like he said, what's-his-face? Wow. Yeah, Isaac Paredes. In the Futures game, Paredes did well. Yeah. Manning made a stellar play defensively. Could he pitch? He didn't really pitch that well. Got pulled by Jim Thome, his manager there, in the Futures game this past Sunday at Progressive Field where the Indians play. Yeah. But Jake Rogers and Manning, the battery, they were the battery there for that less than a half inning, by the way. But, hey, Rogers could be good. Manning could be good. Paredes seems like can hit, Doc. We'll say that much right now.
Hey, in 5 years from now, Riley will come up and do some things in the Futures game, and maybe he'll hit like 30 home runs and have a good time with it. That guy can swing out of his shoes, so we'll see what happens, right?
One day, Doc. There's
day.
one day for everything. And then at a certain point, you can say there's one day for something that's not going to happen, too, like when we talk about some stuff that we want to do. One day, we know at the end of the day, it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
Wrong, Vito, wrong. Always have hope. Always have hope. Now, the thing with the Detroit Tigers is, and I'll say this, for the second half of the season, at least play more competitive. At least
hopefully, right?
At least play more fundamentally sound. Be into the games. There's a big difference when the team kind of looks like they're mailing it in versus when they're playing fundamentally sound baseball. The mistakes should hopefully correct themselves. Hopefully the defense plays better. Just give us something to watch and be proud of because, almost 30 games under 500. It went by quick. The last 2 months, they've lost a plethora of games and a lot of them at home too. So, it's going to be a long summer, but I think it's going to give us grit, you and I covering the team. And probably, Vito, the Tigers Talk podcast is not going to be talking about winning baseball until episodes 300, 400.
Good God, if we're still here. Are we
we're
still going to be
on the air,
alive?
I think so.
Still allowed on the air? If you still allow me in the studio, first and foremost, right?
Exactly. Great podcast. I enjoyed it. Even though the Tigers are struggling, there's still a lot to talk about. I enjoyed talking baseball with you. Want to thank the sponsors, the Detroit Sports Commission, DC Sports at Lakeside Mall. Hey, if you sign up for the Flick Chat application, you might be in line to win a Lou Whitaker baseball. I know Vito's going to pick it up hopefully this week. We'll have some photos of it, and you'll have an opportunity to potentially win a prize from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network if you join Flick. Look for the invite link via our social media platform. Get in. That's all you got to do is join, and you might have a chance to win a Lou Whitaker signed baseball, maybe a future Hall of Famer.
Really quick, big series coming up for the Tigers at Kauffman Stadium in KC. How many people are going to be there for that one this weekend?
Yeah, no doubt.
Nobody.
Yeah,
Nobody.
Exactly. Nobody at all. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. We're still invested. We're still watching. Tough times, but stick with us. We'll still bring you some entertaining baseball content and some more in-depth features regarding some of the roster players on the Detroit Tigers.
Shane Green, pitch well in the All-Star game Tuesday night so the Tigers can trade you. Thank you much, and adios with that being said.